Welcome to Module 5, and we are also in Week 5. So this week we will be covering Chapter 9, Prosocial Behavior, and Chapter 10, Aggression. And these chapters really do play off of each other well, mainly because they're not opposites but more complement one another. We have on one extreme acts of kindness or acts that are selfless, which we tend to consider prosocial behavior, acts that come from altruistic intentions. And then we have aggression, which is the other end of the spectrum, when people lash out, anger and frustration being the root cause of aggressive acts. So we're going to take a look first at Chapter 9, Prosocial Behavior. So you have your to-do list here. And this week I'm going to be offering extra credit opportunities, so we'll talk about that in just a second. But for prosocial behavior, really going to be looking at some of the foundational literature on where the idea of altruism comes from. Some of the sort of seminal research in the area of social psychology that started looking at trying to understand why people would do something for someone else when they get nothing out of it, or even in situations where they may get harmed for intervening or acting. And so that really stemmed from a case back in the 60s of Kitty Genovese and her murder, and sort of what happened during it. And you're going to be seeing a video this week that talks a little bit about that and how that got the research by Lotney and Darley really off the ground. They started looking at why do people choose to get involved when something's happening that could be an emergency type of situation, and why do people not get involved? Is it because we don't care? Is it because there are other factors present that prohibit our action? And what does it take for somebody to act? So we looking at different factors that play a role, things about the situation, and then things about the person. We call those motivational factors. And these types of factors are either going to increase the chances that somebody's going to help or inhibit helping, make somebody feel like they can't or they shouldn't or they just don't want to. We're going to talk about the concept of bystander intervention and how, when you're witnessing, say, an emergency or a crime or something like that, you are the bystander. And how does your emotional state play a role in what you do with what you are involved in and your decision to help? We'll bring up the topic of pluralistic ignorance again. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the semester, but it pops up here again because it plays a role in diffusion of responsibility, which is basically when other people are present, we feel less responsible to act because we assume other people will. So it's sort of like we divorce ourselves from our own decision-making capabilities because we diffuse that onto other people. And then once we are kind of through covering, the emergency situations and the kinds of prosocial acts that take place in that kind of an environment, we'll then look at the role of empathy and really how empathy within a person, which comes from a more motivational place, how it differs from diffusion of responsibility. And we'll look at some different hypotheses as to what makes someone empathetic, what would make somebody care so much about another person to put themselves in that person's shoes and want to help, what factors contribute to that. and we'll look at some of those reasons that play a role there. We'll take a look at some of the research and literature on gratitude. Being grateful and expressing gratitude in life on a daily basis is really at the heart of not only happiness, but also what causes us to help others. When we're grateful and we have gratitude, we can put aside any problems in our life, and we're able to actually help other people. And gratitude isn't the absence of problems or a perfect life. Gratitude is simply being happy in where you're at. And that sort of happiness, that sort of considerate joy or inner joy really affects people, and it affects how we relate with other people. So we'll be taking a look at some of the literature there. And we'll really be diving in a little bit to the area of personality here. Here's where we have a overlap of social and personality psychology. The two are often put together for the reason that in order to understand a lot of social situations, we start talking about the person and factors that are inherent to the individual. So we'll be looking at how those factor into prosocial behavior and what an altruistic personality is exactly, which then drives motivations for things like volunteering. Why does a person volunteer their time, their efforts, their talents, and what does that look like sort of in a social sphere? And so that'll kind of wrap up the section on prosocial behavior. And then when we start getting into aggression, I feel like you'll have a better understanding of, its contrast in how some of this that we talk about up here is really lacking when we start looking at areas of aggressiveness. So again, with aggression, we'll look at some of the foundational theories about aggression. Where does it come from? What's the stem of it? How does situation play a role? We'll look at some of the pivotal models and theories here, like the general aggression model and the frustration aggression hypothesis, which is really the most current but not as accurate theory that we have. There are a lot of other things that have come about since, like excitation transfer theory. And two, as we've delved into this area of research in social psychology, we've realized how much we are affected by what's around us. That aggression is very, very social. While there is definitely some evolutionary perspective on aggression and some biological elements that play a role, it's so much of it is learned, and so much of it is the society that you're in and what you're around. So this is one chapter where we'll really be taking a look at an applied aspect of social psychology. So looking at things like violence in the media, pornography, how these play a role in how we view aggression and what we do with aggression. It's all natural to feel aggression. I can't even speak. Aggressive acts and aggression is a very normal, natural thing, but where you channel that and where it goes really says a lot for the society that you're placed in. Do you channel it appropriately? Do you take it out on others? Is it spawned by what you're involved in and what you're doing? And much of the research would say yes. Things like bullies, being a victim of bullying, alcohol influence, all of these things can factor in and maybe even contribute to underlying aggressive tendencies that we might have that may never develop given the right petri dish of circumstances, but given an environment that sort of breeds aggression, definitely can come out. So we see some of those characteristics a little bit more clearly as we start to unpack them and look at some of the hypotheses underlying some of it. We'll take a look also at like how to deal with aggression. You know, what's an appropriate way of dealing with aggression? Do we punish? What's a deterrent to violence? And I think some of the research there is interesting, and really it all boils down to aggression is much better to be prevented than to deal with after the fact, right? To breed a person who becomes very aggressive, it's hard to control once it gets started. Whereas it's a little bit easier to prevent if educated and the right teaching is in place. So we'll be taking a look at a lot of the different techniques and interventions that are used today in applied areas of psychology to reduce aggression. So your article readings for this week are Article 28 and Article 31, and those go along with the chapters. So Article 28, you'll be looking at different hypotheses of prosocial behavior. And then Article 31, you'll be looking at aggression and in society today, specifically with women, and what kinds of gender differences do we see there with it. We have the lecture slides for Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. And then I do have several videos for you to watch this week. Most of them are very short little clips that I have for you. One on bystander intervention, what got the field started, so that original Kitty Genovese case. And then a very quick one. There's no sound on this one, so don't feel like when you watch it you're missing something. It's sound free, but you're just going to be watching what happens in this experiment called the smoke-filled room study. And then we have a more current kind of what would you do scenario where we're looking at child abduction and why do people choose not to get involved. What does that do in terms of that bystander intervention that we're talking about and diffusion of responsibility. This is a little bit longer one. It's 29 minutes. This has to do with aggression, looking at some of the root causes of it in terms of where we're at today in society. So this is the longest one you're going to watch, and then the others here are just real quick clips, like 1 minute, 30 seconds, also on aggression. And then another quick one on a current sort of social media and electronic device take on aggression. So that'll wrap up the videos for the week, and then you'll have your discussion. So again, you're going to be integrating the articles, and then you're also going to be integrating specifically that last video on bystander apathy and electronic devices. So you need to watch the video, and you need to make sure that you're integrating it into your response for this week's discussion. You have exam 5, which is going to cover chapters 9 and 10. And then here's the extra credit for this week. It has to do with prosocial behavior. Take a look at the video clip I have here. You can just click on it and get an idea of some different random acts of kindness that you can do. I want you guys to try out one of these, whichever one you like. I think there's about 21 of them. But I want you to try something different, kind of think outside the box. And then I want you to just write up a little response on what you did, what you thought about it, how you felt, how the person you did it for felt, if you were able to get the reaction. But you're going to submit it all through here. So you're just going to click on the extra credit link, and you're going to write about it there. And that extra credit is worth 5 points, okay? I don't really offer a lot of extra credit throughout the course of the course, so take advantage of this. You don't want to be asking for extra credit at the end of the course. You want to be doing that now. But again, if you have any questions this week, please let me know, and I'll be happy to answer. Thanks.